This is downtown Klamath Falls right now. I was down here earlier, but I came back a little more well prepared this time. It's gotten a little crazier. Several hundred people lining both sides of the street. Mostly protesters over there, mostly armed citizens over here. There are so many people out here. This is crazy. I can't believe it. Klamath Falls only has like 60,000 people in the whole metro area. So to see a turnout like this out here is pretty crazy. The sort of right-wing counter-protesters, I guess, a lot of them are wearing like blue ribbons. They look like this, like something you'd mark a tree with when you're out logging or something, kind of a blue plastic ribbon. They're marking their arms with that. It's like a thin blue line so that they're on the side of cops. So kind of interesting seeing someone in an InfoWars shirt say that. They sure have changed. So the crowd on the side of the road that I'm on right now is extremely well armed. There's literally hundreds of people here open carrying. Some just handguns. I would maybe say the majority have long guns too. Lots of ARs, but also a lot of other stuff. And it's funny how when everyone's this well armed, it actually remains pretty civil. This cop over here behind me right now is actually talking about how great this is because they don't even have to get involved. The joys of everyone being armed, right? So as you can see from this video, the protests that are sweeping America right now somehow managed to come to my relatively small town of Klamath Falls yesterday. And I actually didn't really know that it was going on until it was well underway. I've been off social media for the last month or two. I just got really tired of so many people who claim to be libertarians defending shutting down society in the name of fighting COVID-19. And frankly, now I'm pretty glad I'm not on it because, man, it's exhausting arguing with people who want to defend looting and also arguing with people who don't want to act like there's a problem with police. It's a really weird time to be someone who legitimately doesn't fall neatly into either, kind of left or right category. But anyway, I received notification probably 8:30 or so from a good friend and trusted source that there was something going on in downtown Klamath. So I went down there and checked it out. I just went down there pretty much dressed like this. Obviously I had a gun because I always do, but just a handgun concealed. And I went down there and I started walking around town and I saw one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. I'd never seen anything like it. In a way, it was actually really cool. There were hundreds. I mean, literally, there was probably at least 300 people open carrying guns. I bet there was well over 500 people that were downtown. I wouldn't be surprised to find out it was over 1,000, maybe even significantly more than that. I don't know. It's really hard to estimate because they were fairly spread out, up and down the streets. But basically every single storefront in downtown Klamath had men with guns guarding it. And I started talking to a few of them, asking, what's going on? Is there a protest? And I found out there was a protest down on Sugarman's Corner, which is just a little plaza right in the middle of downtown. And I would say there were probably around 150 protesters or so, maybe 200, because there were occasionally some that were kind of walking around and roaming the streets. The protesters were definitely outnumbered by just the armed citizens that showed up, and there were also quite a few cops downtown. And then there were also people just driving up and down the streets, some being really obnoxious, like honking their horns and waving giant American flags and, yelling about Trump out the window. And, the way that so many people turned out to defend the businesses, although I didn't really know how necessary that was, it was pretty cool. So after I'd initially gone down there from about 8:30 to maybe a little after 9, I went home for a couple hours, and then I kind of heard that it was starting to maybe heat up more down there. So at that point, I geared up and went down to check it out and see what it was all about. I put on my body armor. I had a few magazines for my AR. I threw the AR that's normally hanging right there on my wall over me with a sling. I put on a full-size handgun instead of the compact one that I normally carry. Got on some ballistic goggles and put some ear pro in my pocket. And I went down there to see what was up. knowing that most likely nothing at all was going to come of it, but I did want to be prepared just in case things did start popping off. So I went down there and I walked around, and I was one of the few people who kept kind of crossing the street and talking to both sides. Like I've said, and like anyone who knows me knows, I'm not really on anyone's side here. I despise the way that law enforcement operates in this country. I think that every cop, even cops who I know personally and like and can hang out with outside of their functions as a cop, I think that they all enforce laws that I consider immoral. I think that law enforcement is very oppressive. I think that there shouldn't be a war on drugs. I think there should be no gun control. I think there should be no taxes. I basically think there should be no government. So, on one hand, I sympathize a bit with the protesters. And yeah, I do oppose the people on the other side who are yelling about border control and who are supporting cops no matter what. Like, I don't like that. On the other hand, I don't support identity politics in the slightest, and I am by no means a liberal. So I don't really fit in with the protesters either. So I was kind of crossing back and forth. The protest was pretty clearly delineated. You had the sort of right-wing counter-protesters on the south side of Main Street, and you had the liberal protesters on the north side of Main Street, but really all in Sugarman's Corner there, right in just the one little area. Once you crossed the road, then there were kind of other people out protecting their stores and stuff. There was just a lot of yelling back and forth at each other. There were a lot of cops down there who, they were very chill and relaxed. I don't think they thought anything was going to happen. In fact, I had several pretty good conversations with the cops. They definitely didn't seem to be bothered by how many armed citizens were there. And they were just kind of there to, break up what few little scuffles did start. I don't think they were ever in any kind of serious fear that something really bad was going to happen. They seemed pretty relaxed. Kind of the big question in everyone's mind right now around here is, were there outside agitators that came to town? Now, anyone that knows me knows that, especially considering how libertarian I am, I'm not much for conspiracy theories. A lot of libertarians are. I tend to be a very skeptical person and not very conspiratorial. So I always kind of roll my eyes at all the conspiracy theorists, be they the liberal conspiracy theories that say that everything that is against them is like a Russian conspiracy, or that any right-wing protesters are being paid by the NRA or the Koch brothers or whatever. And I also laugh at the kind of right-wing conspiracy theories that, Antifa is just running around raiding towns, and they're generally pretty unfounded. Not that there can't be agitators that go places. There certainly seem to have been agitators that have turned these current protests more violent than they should have been. But I tend to be very skeptical of them. So when people were telling me things like, oh, there's a busload of Black Lives Matter protesters down at Walmart, and some of them got arrested, and, they're telling me all this stuff, which I could never really confirm. I was kind of hearing different stories from everybody. I definitely took it with a grain of salt and thought that it was probably mostly bullshit, and thinking to myself, I don't know, maybe some people came over from Ashland. I know for a fact now that some people did come over from Ashland, but that's hardly the same as, a busload of people being shipped in from genuinely out of the area. But there actually seems to be some information that maybe there's more to this than I thought. I'm still a little skeptical, but I do have a very good source that has convinced me that at the very least, law enforcement thought there might be a threat of this happening and that there were credible threats. Now, granted, I don't really trust law enforcement very much, but I think it's worth noting that even if there wasn't anyone who came in from out of the area to try to agitate a riot, the people of Klamath Falls did have decent reason to believe that. So for all of you talking shit about the people who showed up with rifles at the protest, please stop. Like, there really wasn't any violence yesterday. There were a few belligerent people that got arrested. As far as I know, it wasn't anyone carrying guns. There were some drunk people out and about around downtown because of the bars are kind of back open again. And there were definitely some people there that were being more belligerent. From what I saw, it wasn't people with guns. It was just people who were on the side of the people with guns, and there is a difference there. So as far as the issue of whether or not there was some kind of outside threat from agitators and, communists and stuff who are planning to come and potentially attack Klamath Falls, I'm going to put a conversation that I had up on the screen. It is redacted to protect the identity of the individual I had this conversation with. And I'm going to just kind of let it scroll through for a while. If you want, you can stop and you can read what was said. I am just going to read some of the most pertinent parts because it was a fairly long conversation. But all I'm going to say is that this is someone who I trust and who I know should have access to information like this. So this person says, I saw hundreds of vehicles from out of town arriving throughout the afternoon. Lots of Washington plates, in particular, quite a few California. The vast majority of the Portland crowd stuck out like a sore thumb during the afternoon hours on Main Street. 90% of the vehicles I saw on Main Street all afternoon, hundreds, did not have Oregon plates. Now, the most interesting part of this conversation I had is this next part here, which is why I say that those of you who are criticizing the people who showed up with guns to counter-protest and to potentially defend their businesses, I think you need to cut those people some slack because I think that they had good reason to think that maybe something would happen. Info I have is that the Joint Terrorism Task Force alerted the Sheriff's Office and KFPD during the morning hours yesterday that there was a lot of Antifa communication calling for folks to head to Klamath Falls and, quote, burn the city to the ground. No comment on who else was at the 6 p.m. interagency meeting yesterday. Sorry, blank with blank were kept in the loop. I can't say too much of what was going on there because I don't want to give away this person's identity, but needless to say, the person who I was talking to knows what they're talking about. Now, I do know for a fact that there was also a meeting at the fairgrounds beforehand. I believe that was where people started getting the ribbons that went around their arm, the blue ribbons showing that they were on the side of the police, so that they were counter-protesters or whatever. And I believe that a lot of people were there beforehand who were briefed by the sheriff. I talked to several people who had been there, and I asked my source here if that was the meeting that they were talking about, and they said, no, different meeting. The general public wasn't invited. I think the fairgrounds meeting may have been where the blue ribbon thing for locals protecting businesses came about, though. And then later in my conversation with this individual, there were a few more interesting tidbits. Anyway, there were definitely out-of-towners. Some locals I know went out and parked along Highway 97 and Highway 140 to watch for buses incoming. Then other locals followed them around town when they got closer. Allegedly, meaning I didn't see them myself, there were 2 tour buses from the north on 97, and the BLM bus with New York plates came over on 140. I don't have photos for you, though, so I guess take it with a grain of salt without proof. Lots of interesting discussion about the rules of engagement at the meeting, though. We were told to hold our fire until they entered the building, though we put up a hypothetical that if the protesters were out on the sidewalk with a Molotov and ready to throw it, can we fire then? And we were told we should, quote, do what we need to do, and that use of force was valid to protect critical infrastructure. So were there outside agitators that came into Klamath Falls last night hoping to provoke some things? I'm still not really sure either way. I don't think there's enough information to prove or disprove either idea. I have seen a lot of these claims floating around online for other places, which tends to make it sound a little bit like an urban legend to me, just the kind of thing that's getting passed around. But I will tell you that I know for a fact that people did at least have very good reason to think that the cops thought there was going to be a threat. So I really don't think there's any room to criticize people for, showing up with guns, because if something was going to happen, it was averted last night because of how many people were out there, because it was one of the most incredible showings of armed citizens I've ever seen. I mean, I've seen like 1,000 people show up at the Oregon Capitol, and there's been bigger open carry marches other places. we're talking about much bigger cities and things that were planned for a long time. There were probably 300 plus people that showed up with guns last night just to stand guard out in front of stores and stuff. And I think that's pretty cool, personally. And honestly, I think it's a bummer that the anti-police protesters think that that's a bad thing, because this should be your alternative to police, guys. This dude's over here ranting about how cops are killed every 24 hours, which doesn't actually make very much statistical sense, because I think there's maybe 200 some cops killed a year on duty, half of which die in car accidents. Something like a quarter of them are killed in shootings. These people are telling me they love me. What are you guys out here for?
Just watching.
You guys locals? Or?
Yeah. Actually, I think that if they can do this, I can have a graduation. Yep, want a graduation.
I was against the lockdowns from the beginning. I'm not ever going to wear a mask.
Are you not from here?
No, I am. I've lived here for like 3 years. I moved over from Medford a couple years ago. So I've always lived either in Medford or Siskiyou County or now over here. So I've always been around here.
I haven't heard a thing about the Rona since this happened, so.
I know. Well, it's funny though, because a lot of the people who are now out protesting en masse were the exact people who were like telling me I was a terrible person for not wearing a mask and not supporting shutting everything down. So it's kind of funny. I'm kind of out here to laugh at everybody.
We want a graduation.
Yeah, they want to. This is like.
We want a graduation. This is 2020. Class of 2020.
So are you guys all seniors?
No. But they need to walk. If you protest.
No, for sure. This like, what are they doing? Are you guys doing like a parade for you guys? Or?
We get a drive by.
That sounds kind of bad.
Oh yeah, it does. Oh look at. I had more fun at this than I did at graduation. Sure.
Honestly, you'll probably get more out of this than you would out of public school. So. This is the craziest thing I've ever seen living here. Granted, I've only lived here for a little under 3 years now, but I mean, I moved over here because I wanted to get away from Medford, because that was becoming too much of a big city for me. Now that's what this is turning into. That real animated old dude over there on the corner who was yelling about how Blue Lives Matter a second ago is actually making a halfway decent point now. He's yelling about how none of the people out here protesting care about abortion, which is very true. None of them do care at all about the fact that hundreds of thousands of unborn children are murdered every year.
This fucking guy.
What? It's the same guy. Oh, she got
I said no to the abortion plan and protest them not killing more than the cops are.
Over here on the left-wing side of the protest, I guess. It's starting to die down a little bit now that we're getting past midnight, I think. So what were you guys saying? You guys were saying no one from this side of the protest, the kind of left-wing side's been arrested, but a few from over there have been?
That side have been arrested.
3 people.
There was a fight
They
that broke
even
out
fought
first.
among themselves.
That was the first arrest we seen, was a fight, and then the other 2 arrests that we seen were 2 gentlemen trying to come across the street. They tried charging across the street.
Huh.
They got arrested too.
Did you guys hear anything? I have no idea if it was true, but I heard people there talking about like a busload of protesters that came over to Walmart.
Somebody shared a status on Facebook. There was a status that was shared on Facebook, and it was saying that busloads of people were being paid to go around
It's
the city.
100% a lie.
I thought it sounded like nonsense. So is this just like something that people organized on Facebook?
All local. Everybody just came to express their feelings peacefully, not trying to start a fight, not trying to have any bloodshed. Most
good to know.
of the people here were very young, and they spoke out, and it's important to them.
Awesome.
Don't you think it's crazy though that a bunch of people came out here to fucking yell at us for trying to speak about something that means something to us and being peaceful? And everybody comes out here with their guns and they want to fucking yell at us and tell us to go home and that this isn't our country and start screaming USA. We just came out here to try to speak about someone that was killed fucking wrongfully.
Yeah, I mean, the one issue I would say is that I think a lot of people are worried that it's not going to be just that, because we have seen that in other cities.
A lot of people out here are being loud, and there's a lot of people on both sides. See, there's a lot of people on both sides that are being loud and being rowdy. But the only reason that all of the people across the street came here was to get a reaction out of us. That's the only reason they're here. They're not here because they're trying to fight for anything. I'm not here because they're trying to speak for anything. They're here so they can get a reaction out of us. So as soon as we're violent, the law can do something about moving us from right here.
Well, I know
That's the only reason they're here.
I know a lot of people.
The people that are here to protect their stores, that's fully understandable. Just in case.
That's what I was. That's the only reason I know about it is because one of my friends who owns a store at the far other end
just in case something
told me
about to escalate. The people that are here to protect their stores, that's totally understandable. But the majority of the people over here are here just to antagonize us and get a fucking reaction out of us.
Sorry.
Right.
Yeah, none of us want
There's
to
a
see
visible
damage.
division. It's one side versus the other. You can see where
Oh,
it's
yeah.
at. I think it's really sad.
The
So do you-
police
So
have
why are
been
you out here just to ask
absolutely
us why we're out here? Or
Just to see what's going on, document
you felt like
things.
you needed to bring a big old gun for that?
I always have a gun. I usually have a rifle in my vehicle, and I always have a handgun on my person.
I can
So
stand right here with the gun.
I'm definitely pro Second Amendment.
that's not. I would challenge you on that. I've gone to open carry rallies with plenty of black people. I've gone to open carry rallies.
Open carry rallies and protesting are different things. They're allowed to have their guns because they're protecting their fucking city. But if we were to have guns and be over here waving our guns at them, we'd be violent.
Well, but you shouldn't be waving a gun at anyone. If you had a gun on
they're
you.
over there fucking holding their guns up and flying fucking Trump flags and screaming at us about black lives don't even matter to us. That's bullshit. They're only here to get a reaction. For the people that are here to protect themselves and their things, that's cool. But if you're coming here just to protest the protesting, you're just making a bigger point for the reason why we're here. That's
Do you think?
furthering the point.
I'll tell you that police have been very impressive, and you might know that none of our police officers have their badges covered up. None of them have their body cams covered up. They're doing a good job. They're doing
It's the people across
right,
the street that
but
make me feel threatened.
people get a feeling towards the officers, and we're not against the police. And they've been doing a great job, and they've been patrolling and keeping everybody safe, even though they've been put in harm's way. So they're appreciated too. But justice needs to happen for all people.
Yeah.
It's just like my sister's sign says.
Very true. Minneapolis and Klamath Falls are what?
It doesn't matter about like states like Minneapolis or.
It's a problem everywhere.
But like it's not about cities or places or shit like that. The injustice.
We've had no shortage of people killed around here unjustly by cops. There was a mentally ill guy killed over in
People are
Medford.
killed unjustly by police. People are killed unjustly by each other, and that's why we're here.
Sometimes they're killed unjustly, but depending on the color of their skin,
Nothing happens.
exactly. If he was white, then they were prosecuted. If he was black, everybody got quiet.
I mean, everybody can see you. And there can be two people that fucking commit the same crime and get completely different charges all because of how they look. It's not a secret.
There's someone walking around
It's
here
not
with a sign
made
that
up.
says all that, like
We're
a
not
lot
out
of
here
names
making
on
shit
it
up to fight
of
about.
people of
It's
color
something
who've
that's
been
really
killed by the police, and some of them have faced charges, but a lot of them have not.
Yeah.
And while most police officers are good, in general, most
I
of
would
them are
challenge
good.
that. Every cop is enforcing something oppressive. Every cop out here would arrest you for carrying a gun without a permit,
Maybe, but
for
I feel like
having
that's a
drugs,
whole different subject.
for-
But in general,
I'm not even talking
they're
about
human
police.
and they're fallible.
All those people that
but
are the
they
police are
need
here
to
to
police
protect
themselves.
everyone right now. But all the people that are over there,
yeah. At the moment,
majority of the people that are over there are only there because we're here. Yes, ma'am. Hi. How are you doing?
Really good. How are you?
after this video cut off here, I talked to these two girls there for quite a bit longer, probably another 15 or 20 minutes. We had a nice conversation. The one that you saw on the camera talking to me actually eventually said, "Oh wow, you're a good guy. Can I give you a hug?" and gave me a hug because they realized that I wasn't really with the counter protesters and that I actually do have a major problem with injustice. So that was kind of cool. It was nice to get to paint gun owners in a positive light in some people's eyes. I actually tried to get them to come across the street with me and talk to some of the other protesters that were there on the other side, the counter protesters, the sort of right-wing side. And they said they really wanted to, because I told them, hey, look, I'll make sure that, you know, if I'm with you, no one will hurt you guys. They don't dislike me, and I'm armed so I can protect you. Let's go talk to them and try to see, you know, because I'd talked to both sides a bunch at that point and was actually finding more common ground than people would think. Basically, everyone that I talked to on the opposite side of the protesters, all the counter protesters, all the right-wing people, everyone that I talked to was like, oh yeah, George Floyd was murdered. Like that, those cops need to go down. That's not to say that I'm sure they all are, you know, are libertarians like me who have major problems with law enforcement in general, but everyone does at least recognize that this was a case of injustice and that this guy should be punished. I mean, even people who I saw trying to defend the Ahmaud Arbery shooters a couple weeks ago, and that was a pretty bad shooting, even those people now, for the most part, are like, oh yeah, no, this was bad. This was murder. And a lot of people over there even thought that there should be major reforms to police. Some people that I talked to for a while and was telling them, hey, you know, why don't we just have less laws? Why don't we get rid of things like the war on drugs? Why don't we roll back a lot of these laws that are making police just come into contact with people for things they should never come into contact with? I got a lot of people to even, you know, kind of agree with me there. So I really wanted to try to get some of the protesters and some of the counter protesters to talk to each other, kind of facilitate that. It didn't work. The protesters all seemed to be very afraid of the counter protesters. They all thought that they were the ones trying to incite violence, which is kind of funny because when you talk to the other side of the crowd, they all thought the left-wingers were the ones trying to incite violence. Here I am like, guys, no one's really inciting any violence here. Why don't we just actually talk instead of yelling at each other? Towards the end of the night, there was one kind of cool moment that I got to be a part of. It wasn't as cool as it could have been. There was this old guy, probably mid-60s or so, on the left-wing side of the protest who said something like, you know, I think we should really all just like shake hands and go home for that. He kind of said it to me and some other people that were standing there. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. And then he didn't do anything about it. So I was like, well, I'm loud. I guess I'll do this. So I actually walked out in the middle of the street and I just said, hey guys, why don't we all, you know, shake hands and go home for the night? And quite a few people did. I wasn't filming at the time, but somebody did live stream the whole thing and it was kind of caught on there, although he spoke over me and you can barely hear me.
Again, this is Klamath Falls, Oregon. Right? Famous. Oh. I think it's all over. Everybody's shaking hands.
Everyone from both sides of the aisle are kind of coming together to shake hands right now and go home for the evening. I think that was a good idea that guy had. So quite a few people did cross the road and shake hands and I guess go home for the night, maybe 20 or 30. It was starting to dwindle pretty severely by that point. You know, we were probably down to half to a third the people that there were at the peak. I went home after that. It looks like that was about 12:30. It looks like the protest went on for maybe another hour until everyone was basically gone. But nothing happened. The cops were very calm and relaxed. Like I said earlier, you know, I actually heard one cop talking about how great it was that they didn't really have to do anything or worry about anything because there were so many armed people there. They just didn't think anything was going to pop off. And actually, the best moment of the night for me, actually, where I got to bro out with some cops a little bit, actually came right after I told everyone they should shake hands. As I was kind of walking home, I walked by some cops, and this cop was kind of a middle-aged guy, and he very sincerely said to me, that was a wonderful idea. You know, I wish more of them would have done it. And I was like, yeah, I know, it wasn't my idea, but I just had the loud voice. And then right after that, the two cops that were right there started talking about the guy that made them the most worried. They were like, oh yeah, that one over there, you know, he doesn't even look like he knows how to carry a gun, doesn't look very strong or whatever. That's the kind of person who worries me most, carrying a gun. So I kind of laughed at that and I was like, yeah, I've seen a few of those people out here who are just sort of, you know, embarrassing the rest of the gun owners because they have their pistol in a very ill-fitting, unsecure holster flopping around on their belt, or they have what's just blatantly an inside the waistband holster that they've like clipped on their pocket and it's hanging. It looks like their gun's about to fall out, or they just have no real muzzle control. And so the cops kind of laughed about that. And, we thought it was funny because we were like, some of us are out here with like body armor and serious rifles and tourniquets and medical gear and actually have a little bit of training and kind of know what we're doing. And I thought it was pretty funny. So, I told him good night and then I went home. And that was pretty much it. I guess we'll see if anything else goes on today. As far as I know, there wasn't really going to be nearly as much going on today. I haven't heard about anything in particular going on, although I do know that it's been starting to get pretty spicy over in Medford. Anyhow, guys, that's about all I have to say about the May 31st Black Lives Matter protest in downtown Klamath Falls. I'm just going to let the last 8 or 9 minutes of the video kind of play out here with a conversation that I had with some guys. This time I'm talking to the right-wing side of the protest, kind of, challenging them a little bit and trying to get them to see things from the perspective of like a libertarian who realizes that there are major problems with police abuse in this country and basically in any country that has police officers. And the video does cut off well before the end of the conversation. I was just about out of memory space on my camera, and I wanted to save at least a little bit more in case anything crazy happened. So I cut it off, but I think you'll still get some interesting stuff out of this. And after it ended, I continued talking to the guy that you see in this video, and then the dude you see in like an American flag face mask who is right next to him. I talked to those two for probably another 20 minutes or so after that. We had a really good conversation. I think I made a lot of progress with them. I kind of took the guy from the point where he's saying like, oh, the law is the law, to getting him to realize like, oh yeah, we do live in a country that was built on the idea of, throwing off oppressors. And I don't know. I think I got him to see a little bit that there are some major problems with police. And the other guy in the American flag mask, he was almost like totally on my side by the end of the conversation. He kept turning to the guy like, no, you got to listen to him. Like, this is what he means. No, he is right. Anyway, enjoy the conversation, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back with more content soon.
Cops told me earlier the West Coast of here operates totally different than East Coast.
No, we all support that the fact that... Go ahead. I believe...
Can I ask you a question? Okay, you say that the cops here aren't in danger, right?
I didn't say that.
Okay,
No.
well, you said that you guys being here are not threatening the police officers here.
No one here is here to harm police officers.
Okay, but now this message, if misconstrued, could potentially put officers in harm because they could lose their respect by the community. They could lose their place in the community. Here where we live, our people could turn on our officers just as quick by a national
Let's scoot back
message,
here a little bit, guys. We're
by a
kind of right
message
in
that
the road.
is not even happening in our state. And we are against the police brutality. We do think it needs to stop.
But now, here, I want to ask you something, though. You say it's not happening in our state, but do you know the name Matthew Graves?
Yes.
No, I don't.
Over in Eagle Point?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. He was a friend of mine. And from what I understood, he jumped out of the car firing a weapon at the police officers.
Sir, what you're talking about is nonsense. Has nothing to do with it. Matthew Graves was walking across the street from the
I got
Walmart.
The wrong guy. Never mind. My friend Matt. Never mind.
He was walking across the street from the Eagle Point Walmart. I used to live in Medford till a couple years ago, so if you're familiar with the area. Crossing the street to Carl's Jr., a cop stopped him and started accosting him, which, frankly, as a freedom-loving, heavily armed American, I don't think a cop should be accosting me like that. He basically told the cop, leave me alone. The cop got pissed because he wasn't just acquiescing to him, which the guy had no constitutional... The cop had no constitutional right to stop him. The cop followed him into the Carl's Jr., started an altercation with him. Another cop responded, and I forget if it was I think it was the original officer, but basically they thought that he had a gun. What I think had happened, it turned out, was that the cop's taser had ended up on the ground, and as the guy was like struggling around, he'd reached for it, and they thought he was reaching for a gun, so they shot him. So it was a little bit, the cop shouldn't have messed with him in the first place. That's the real issue. It was a little bit, it wasn't like cold-blooded murder the way the George Floyd thing was. It was an accident, but that guy is still a cop.
Yeah.
he shouldn't be a cop anymore. So
I thought
can't you
for
see why
sure you
people would
would've
want to
went to
protest
all
things like that?
I thought
Well,
for
Lavoy
sure.
Finicum's another unjust shooting.
And that was definitely, and that's where there is definitely a corruption.
with the George Floyd. There was way too many cops on him for this, but that wasn't like he was trying to murder him. I will say that. It wasn't like he was trying to.
You don't think he was trying to murder George Floyd?
I don't think, but when he was yelling that he needed to breathe, he needed to actually respond.
Not to mention,
that.
Have you ever been a cop?
no.
I was here. I was with the city for 3 years. Do you know how many dirtbag fucking career criminals? They'll kill their whole family, and then when you detain them on the ground,
They'll yell.
ow,
Exactly.
and you just video that part. It looks fucking bad.
Sure.
And if you just see that part, that's fucking bad. First of all, what you're talking about has nothing to do with climate.
Exactly.
So why
is all this here?
I understand
What
that.
we're trying to say.
I mean, what I was talking about was something that happened in.
You were saying something
it just
that
doesn't make
happened in
sense.
Yeah, I was saying something that happened in Eagle Point. I
But
mean,
that's not Klamath Falls.
It's not Klamath.
okay, but Klamath is a pretty small population. There's only, and a population this size is only going to be a police shooting every year. What's happening in
There is
Eagle
not,
Point
though.
could be fairly indicative of what's going on in other
There's
towns.
literally been police officers that have been shot here plenty of
Police
times.
officer that you have to make a split second like that, so you cannot.
But why does it matter
when you
where it
guys are in
happens?
trouble, the first
It
people
doesn't,
you're going to
but here's
call
the
are
thing.
the police officers.
I'm
Is
not,
We're talking
but,
about
I mean-
something
I guarantee
that
you
is
will.
a couple
I won't.
states over.
You have
It
not.
does
been-
matter.
Somebody that's got
They're
7
starting
appointments
something.
overseas and 2
I
different
understand.
hearts.
I did one in
promise
I did one in Iraq. I was in the military.
You need 'em.
My philosophy on police.
I promise you that you will.
My philosophy on police is that I will only call police if not calling police will get me in trouble. So sure, if a home invader breaks into my house and I kill him, obviously I'm not going to cover up a justifiable homicide. I'm going to call the police, but they're not exactly coming out to protect me at that point. Why be so what?
So damn against
And that's
police
where we
officers.
feel like you guys keep throwing race
Well,
at us
I'm not against
when
police
we're not
officers
here
in
for
theory.
race.
I'm not against.
When we're here, Black Lives Matters, we
If
feel
they
like
have
it's a
police
race
officers?
been
But
agreement.
why wouldn't
Would
you
it have
want
happened
to
in the
stand-
first place
why
if there weren't
wouldn't
police
you want to
officers?
stand-
How? I mean,
We would love
let me
to
let me ask you this. Let me ask you this.
Anybody
There's
black?
people that are fucking doing this bullshit already.
yeah.
There's people that are trying to start fights. There's people that are robbing,
we should.
murdering,
And I do
and doing all this kind of shit.
I tell everybody this.
Somebody that
I go, you know,
you're pro-gun and everything. You understand why this side is here. Seeing all the videos that we've seen and everything.
Oh, absolutely. I came down here to help a friend protect his business, not a store, but
So
we're not looking at the key concept that we all should. The problem isn't that
that's what these group of protesters.
Black Lives Matters, Mexican Lives Matters. The problem
That's
is
the outcome that is what we see. That's the only result, the only outcome. There's no positive outcome that comes from this.
I mean, what's going on currently? I mean, I have
They're like 12-year-old girls.
Well, true. No, I mean, I have major problems with it. I mean, most of the protesters, we're seeing literal communists breaking through people's windows because they're envious of them. At this point, has nothing to do with justice, but there are issues.
Walking traffic has nothing to do with justice.
No, it doesn't. Well, I mean, I can see to some extent if people want to be truly peaceful. This happened during the civil rights movement in the 1960s.
If they do what our farmers did, and you call everybody,
It's like an over 20-mile convoy.
it was a 20-mile.
Oh, the
That is a peaceful.
what was that? The
protest.
Timber Unity people or something?
That is a peaceful protest.
I agree.
It's not a peaceful. Calling us pieces of shit because we're.
For the most part, it's pretty.
It has been peaceful, other than what happened earlier. But yes,
What happened earlier?
they all
I missed
ran across. And everybody's fighting in the middle of the road.
It's funny because over there they're saying that all the instigators are coming from here. I mean, I take that with a grain of salt.
One of those girls targeted
Yeah, it is really.
Really.
It doesn't matter.
I mean, like I said,
But that
I take
doesn't
what they
matter.
say with a grain of salt.
It
I'm not
doesn't
on their
matter.
side entirely.
They wanted a peace.
One of those girls just had a sign and it said no justice, no, and it's supposed to be a peace sign, but it was Mercedes.
But
No justice, no Mercedes.
It doesn't matter though. If they wanted a peaceful, they would do what our farmers did here in Oregon, and they would have, and they went right down this road. Not even 3 days ago.
yeah, no,
That is a
I'm,
peaceful fucking
I agree.
protest.
And I think it's an effective protest too.
Sending people, or even if that didn't happen, but doing this right now, this is not.
I agree with that.
I am here. I literally went down and met with the sheriff down at the fucking fairgrounds, and we were here just to make sure that the police officers have backup.
Black Lives Matter. To me, that
And yeah, and it irritates me that they're all still arguing and fighting around when I have to be at work at 5 o'clock in the morning.
So let me ask you this though, because I think a lot of people don't realize what's the real issue with. None of them do either, mind you. These people will all go to the polls and vote for bigger government in November. I mean, I'm not voting for Trump, but I sure as hell am not voting for Biden either.
I'm not voting for nobody, but I do believe in what Trump does.
I'm not voting for anybody. That's where I'm at. But what would you think about just? It's kind of cleared out now. What do you think about just having cops enforce a whole lot less laws? I mean, you don't want Oregon to turn into California, do you?
Well,
I think none of us in Oregon want that. So then you agree that there's a point where cops can stop enforcing too many laws.
No.
So why not have the cops stop?
If a law is a law, that is the law.
You gonna give up your guns if they ask you to?
No. That's
Me
different,
either.
though.
That
That's
is
not
it?
a
How's
law.
that? Well,
that's our Second Amendment to keep and to bear arms.
I think what he's saying is, what if that becomes the law here, though?
yeah. I mean, I agree. They have the document that supposedly gives them authority says that they can't take away guns. I'm just gonna.